Marcus Reeve, 39, stood in the music room of the Prescott mansion that had not played a note in 14 years, holding a small brass key he had worked nearly 4 weeks to earn. Camille Prescott, who ran the independent label her grandmother founded in 1959, stood 6 paces behind him, her bottom lip caught between her teeth. Her May joke still hung in the air. The assistant laughed. The family attorney laughed thinly. Marcus did not. None of them knew the first song would be her grandmother's voice from 1962, or what waited sealed behind the selection slot 2 weeks earlier, on Thursday morning, the 16th of May, 2024. Marcus Reeve walked his 6-year-old nephew, Amari, 3 blocks down Cooper Street, to the small brick house where Loretta Givens lived. Loretta was 63, widowed, and had been Renee Reeve's closest friend for 20 years. She watched Amari before and after kindergarten and never asked Marcus how he was doing in a tone that required him to lie. Amari carried his backpack on both shoulders the way his father had taught him. In the inside pocket of his jacket sat a harmonica that had belonged to Darius Reeve, a Hohner Marine band in the key of A, never played because the boy did not yet know how. Amari liked to know it was there. Marcus understood. There were days when he himself touched the edge of his sister's old wristwatch in his pocket for no reason at all. Renee and Darius had been driving back from a wedding in Little Rock on the 29th of October, 2021, when a long-haul driver who had not slept in 31 hours crossed the median on Interstate 40 near Brownsville. Renee died at the scene. Darius died in a hospital in Jackson 4 hours later. Amari, 3 years and 4 months old at the time, had been at Loretta's house for the weekend. Marcus had been at his bench in Detroit when the call came. He drove south through the night and never went back. By the summer of 2022, the legal paperwork was finished. Marcus was Amari's guardian. He opened Reeve Electromechanical Restoration on Lamar Avenue in March of 2023, a converted muffler shop with 2 work bays and a back room full of capacitors, drive belts, and vacuum tubes nobody had manufactured since the Carter administration. Marcus restored jukeboxes, pinball machines, antique radios, and the occasional player piano mechanism. He was one of perhaps 15 men in the country who did this work seriously, and one of perhaps 3 who was black. He had earned his name in the trade the long way, by being right about machines, over and over, for almost 2 decades. The phone in the shop rang at 9:34 that Thursday morning. The voice on the other end was warm and careful, the kind of Memphis-trained professionalism older Southern executives deployed when calling a stranger they wanted on their side from the first sentence. "Mr. Reeve, my name is Naomi Hadley. I'm calling from Prescott Sound on Beale Street. I am Miss Prescott's executive assistant." "Yes, ma'am." Miss Prescott has a 1962 Wurlitzer in her family home in Central Gardens. It belonged to her grandmother. It has not played in approximately 14 years, and she has finally decided she'd like to bring it back. "Your name came up through Henry Caldwell at the State Museum's Preservation Department." Marcus knew Henry Caldwell. He had consulted twice on antique radio cabinets in the museum's collection. Henry did not throw referrals around. "What model is the Wurlitzer?" "A 270, I'm told." "That's a 1962 unit. 50 selections on 45 revolutions per minute records. I can be in Central Gardens at 2 o'clock this afternoon. The address is on Belvedere Boulevard. I'll text the gate code." Marcus hung up. He looked out at Lamar Avenue for a moment. Central Gardens was the wealthiest neighborhood in Memphis, 10 minutes from his shop and 100 years from his life. He had driven through it exactly twice in 3 years, and both times a patrol car had pulled alongside him to ask, politely, what brought him in. He said nothing about it. He pulled a clean shirt from his locker and went to wash his hands. Marcus reached the Belvedere gate at 1:55. The neighborhood guard took Marcus's driver's license, walked it into the booth, and made 2 phone calls before the gate arm lifted. The whole interaction took 8 minutes. The gate code had been valid the entire time. Marcus kept both hands on the wheel where the booth camera could see them, the way he had taught himself to do as a teenager in Detroit. The driveway curved through old oaks before the house appeared, a 1920s Tudor with ivy-covered stone and a slate roof. Naomi Hadley opened the front door before he reached the steps, in a cream blouse and gray slacks, with the careful warmth of a good assistant who had decided to like him before he opened his mouth. "Mr. Reeve, please come in. Miss Prescott is in the music room with Mr. Ashford." He stepped inside. The interior was warm walnut and old oriental rugs. Naomi led him through a sitting room into a smaller room on the east side of the house. Tall south-facing windows, a baby grand piano against one wall, 2 leather chairs in front of an unlit fireplace, and on the opposite wall, the Wurlitzer. The chrome had dulled but not corroded. The colored dome had yellowed only slightly. The cabinet wood was, against all odds, in remarkable condition. A woman in a navy dress stood up from one of the leather chairs. Ash blonde, mid-30s, coffee cup in her hand. "You must be Mr. Reeve. Camille Prescott. This is Bennett Ashford, my family's attorney." Ashford rose more slowly from the other chair. 66. Silver hair combed straight back, a beige summer blazer, a Tennessee bar lapel pin. He offered his hand with about half the pressure he had used on the air around him. He did not meet Marcus's eyes. "Mr. Reeve, sit." Marcus did not approach the Wurlitzer right away. He stood about 8 feet from it and looked. Camille noticed. "Is something wrong?" "No, ma'am. I want to remember what was here before I touched anything." He spent 15 minutes inside the cabinet with a flashlight and a notepad. The drive belt was shot. 2 tubes were dark at the base. The selection solenoids needed cleaning. 3 capacitors had aged out, including one in the amplifier beginning to bulge. Mechanically, though, the unit was in better shape than 14 silent years had any right to leave it. 3 to 4 weeks of part-time work. I'd want to transport it to my shop on Lamar. $6,000. Parts included. Ashford made a small sound from his chair. "Camille, dear, 6,000 for what is essentially a piece of furniture. Perhaps we ought to consider a shop, more accustomed to working in this neighborhood." The sentence landed on the walnut floor with a weight of its own. Naomi's smile did not move, but the warmth left her eyes for a half-second. Camille's jaw tightened. "Teddy, I'm only suggesting, Mr. Reeve. Will you take the job?" "Yes, ma'am." She held his eyes for a beat longer than was strictly necessary, and then she allowed herself the smallest smile, half challenge, half apology to a man she did not yet know she would need. "And Mr. Reeve, if you actually get this old thing singing again, I might have to kiss you." Naomi laughed, brief and warm. Ashford produced a smile that did not pass his mouth. Marcus nodded once. "I'll bring a truck next Thursday, ma'am." He shook her hand. He shook Naomi's. He gave Ashford a short nod the attorney did not return. In the truck, before he started the engine, he sat very still for a moment. He was not thinking about the kiss. He was thinking about the phrase, "a shop, more accustomed to working in this neighborhood," and the way Camille had not laughed. The Wurlitzer arrived at the Lamar Avenue shop on Thursday, the 23rd of May. He cleared Bay 2 for it, leveled it on his work platform, and the movers were gone by noon. He spent the first week on diagnostics. He ordered parts on Friday. They arrived the following Tuesday. It was in the middle of the second week, while cleaning the selection mechanism, that Marcus first noticed the card in slot A1. The cards in the holder were a tour of 1962 Memphis radio, Bobby Bland, Patsy Cline, Ray Charles, Brenda Lee, Sam Cooke. Only the card in A1 broke the pattern. It read, in slow, careful handwriting, "By the River Slow, EP, November 1962. Marcus opened the front panel and slid the record holder out far enough to see the disc in slot A1. It was not a commercial pressing. The label was hand-typed on a paper template. Sun Studio Annex, Memphis, October 1962. The initials at the bottom, EP. He stood at his bench for a long moment with the disc in its sleeve. He opened his laptop. Eleanor Prescott had founded Prescott Sound in 1959. She had run it for 60 years. She had died in 2019 at the age of 83. There was no commercial release by her in any archive Marcus could find. Her name appeared as producer, as A&R, as label president, never as artist. He scrolled through a private contact list. The name he was looking for came up on the third scroll. Walter Briggs, 74, son of Henry Briggs, who had run a small, sun-licensed annex on Chelsea Avenue from 1959 through 1965. The phone rang 4 times. Briggs. Mr. Briggs, my name is Marcus Reeve. I'm a restoration specialist on Lamar. Henry Caldwell at the State Museum gave me your number some time back. Henry Caldwell. He's still working over there? Yes, sir. I'm restoring a 1962 Wurlitzer that belonged to Eleanor Prescott of Prescott Sound. I'm finding what looks like a one-off acetate in slot A1. The label says Sun Annex, Memphis, October 1962. Initials E.P. A long silence. Mr. Reeve. Yes, that means something to me. Marcus waited. My father's studio. Eleanor Prescott came in to record one afternoon in October of 1962. I was 11 years old. She paid in cash before the session began. She had a piano accompaniment, played by a session man named Robert Cole. She wrote the song herself. She sang in a low alto, she told my father, and these are the words I have remembered for 62 years. Henry, if this gets pressed and released commercially, it will be on my own label, or it will not be released at all. He cut 3 acetates. She took 2. It was never released. It was never released. By the time my father died, in 1994, his copy was already gone, sold in an estate sale by people who did not know what they had. And the 2 she took, I never knew. Until just now, Marcus said quietly, she left one in this jukebox. That she did, Mr. Briggs. One more thing. Did she ever come back to you in the years after? A pause, and a softness entered Walter Briggs's voice. February of 2018. She was 82. She drove to my house in Whitehaven with one of her acetates in her lap. She asked me to transfer it to a digital file. When we were done, she said, and I quote her, "There is a person in my life. I want to hear this someday, when she is ready." She did not say who. I did not ask. She paid me in cash. She drove home. She died the following spring. Marcus put the acetate back in slot A1. He closed the cabinet. He did not play the disc. It was not his to play first. Saturday night on Cooper Street. Marcus had cooked grilled cheese on the cast-iron skillet his mother had given Renee when Renee got married, and Amari had eaten his sitting cross-legged on the kitchen floor because he liked the floor better than the chair. The harmonica was on the linoleum in front of him. He did not blow into it. Uncle Marcus. Yes, sir. Why don't you ever talk about Mom? Marcus set down his coffee. He came around the counter and sat on the floor across from his nephew, his back against the cabinets, and for a moment he just looked at the boy, at Renee's eyes in a child's face, and Darius's quiet, steady mouth. I do talk about her, just not always out loud. Tell me one thing. Marcus thought for a moment. When I was 8, your mama was 12. She came home from school one day with a broken transistor radio she had found behind the church. She decided we were going to fix it. We did not know how to fix anything. We sat on the back steps for 4 hours, with a soldering iron our father had not given us permission to touch. And she burned her thumb twice, and by the end of it, that radio played WDIA so clearly you could hear the announcer breathing. She said, "Marcus, see, you just have to be more stubborn than the broken part." That's the woman she was. Amari was quiet. Then he smiled. It was the first time Marcus had seen him smile in nearly a week. Can I come to the shop tomorrow? Yes, you can. On Sunday afternoon, Amari sat on a stool in Bay 2 with a model airplane kit Marcus had bought him at the hobby store on Summer Avenue. The Wurlitzer was on its work platform, partly disassembled, brass and chrome catching the light through the high bay windows. Marcus moved between the bench and the cabinet, hands steady, while the boy watched. Uncle Marcus. Yeah? Is this the blonde lady's machine? Yes, it is. Amari studied the jukebox, the way a small child studies something larger than himself, but not at all frightening. He set his glue bottle down carefully and walked over to stand beside his uncle, his small hand resting on Marcus's knee. Then you have to do it really good. She's been waiting a long time. Marcus did not answer right away. He looked down at the boy, at the seriousness in his face, and he wiped his hands on a shop rag. I will. They walked down to the coffee shop on the corner of Lamar and Bellevue afterward, because Marcus had run out of milk, and Amari liked the chocolate chip cookies the owner's wife baked. The shop was small, 4 tables, ceiling fan, a regular crowd of older men who came every afternoon to talk about high school football from 40 years ago. One of them, a man named Cleveland Hooks, who had known Marcus's uncle in the 70s, leaned over from the next table while Marcus was paying. "Reeve, Cleveland, heard you took a job out in Central Gardens, the Prescott place. Word travels. You watch yourself, son. Those folks out there, they hire you, they smile at you, and then when something breaks 2 months later, suddenly the only person who touched the machine is the only person they remember." Marcus picked up the cookie bag. "I hear you. I'm not saying don't do the work. I'm saying get it in writing, and don't get fond of any of them." Amari, who had been quietly studying his cookie, looked up at his uncle, and then, under the table, slid his small hand into Marcus's. Marcus felt the boy's fingers wrap around his thumb the way they had the night Marcus drove him home from Loretta's for the first time, almost 3 years before, knowing he would not be leaving again. "I'll be careful, Cleveland. Thank you." They walked back to the shop. Amari did not let go of his hand the whole way. She arrived at the shop on Wednesday, the 5th of June, just after 11 in the morning. Marcus heard the bell over the door from where he was kneeling beside the Wurlitzer. He stood, wiped his hands, and walked to the front. "Mr. Reeve, I hope this isn't an imposition." She was in jeans and a white linen shirt, hair pulled back. She looked younger than she had in the navy dress, and tired in a way he had not noticed in the music room. "Miss Prescott, come on back." He led her into Bay 2. The Wurlitzer sat on its platform under the work light, the chrome newly polished, the cabinet conditioned. She stopped at the edge of the bay and just looked at it. "May God, it still needs 3 days of final assembly and bench testing. But yes, it's coming back." She walked around it slowly. Then she surprised him. "What are you replacing the rubber drive belt with? Modern neoprene, or the original natural rubber spec?" He looked at her. "Natural rubber. Period correct. And the capacitors? Film, not electrolytic, in the amplifier section. The originals were paper and oil. Those are difficult to source, so I'm using a higher grade film equivalent that holds tolerance better than the originals did when they were new." She nodded slowly. "You have a background in this?" "I studied audio engineering at Memphis State before I switched my major. I was going to be a recording engineer. My grandmother decided I was going to run the label. We compromised. I learned the studio side well enough to know when someone is lying to me about it." "You came out here to test me." She smiled. A real one this time. "A little. I'm sorry. I had to know." It was at that moment that Amari emerged from the small corner table where Marcus had set him up with the model airplane. He came up beside his uncle and looked up at Camille with the unhurried gravity of a 6-year-old assessing a stranger. She did not crouch in the eager way some adults did. She knelt slowly on one knee, her hands resting on her thigh, and she did not reach toward him. "Hello. What's your name?" "Amari Reeve." "Hello, Amari Reeve. What are you working on?" "A B-25 Mitchell. It's a bomber from World War II. My dad liked them." "That's a beautiful airplane. You can come look at it. But don't touch the wings yet. The glue isn't dry." She followed him to the corner table. Marcus watched, hands hanging at his sides, as a woman he had met 3 weeks ago listened to his nephew explain glue cure times with the same attention she would have given a board meeting. When she left, she shook Marcus's hand and said simply, "Thank you for letting me see it." Then she got into her car and drove west on Lamar. The black BMW pulled into the lot less than 10 minutes later. Bennett Ashford got out alone. He came in through the front door without knocking. He walked through the customer area into Bay 2 as if he owned the building. "Mr. Reeve." "Mr. Ashford, I won't be long. I want to extend you a professional courtesy, one man to another." He stopped about 4 feet from the Wurlitzer and looked at it. He did not look at Marcus. "Camille is in a sensitive period. Her grandmother passed not long ago. She is prone to forming attachments in the wrong places. Estate work is delicate. I would prefer that the people who pass through her home this year remember they are passing through. I am asking you plainly to understand your position in this story." Marcus set the wrench down on his bench. "My position is fixing the machine. You worry about yours." Ashford produced a smile that did not move past his mouth. He turned and walked out. Mary, in the corner, did not say anything. But Marcus saw him watching the door long after the BMW was gone. The Wurlitzer was reinstalled in the music room of the Prescott house on Monday, the 10th of June, 2024, at 2:02 in the afternoon. Walter Briggs arrived at 1:52, brought by his daughter from Whitehaven. He was 74, in a gray button-down shirt and dark slacks, carrying a small leather portfolio under one arm. Camille met him at the door herself. She took his hand in both of hers. "Mr. Briggs, thank you for coming." "Miss Prescott, it is my privilege." Naomi was there. Bennett Ashford was there as well, in a navy summer suit, with a leather notebook open in his lap. Marcus performed a final test of the mechanism with the front panel open, solenoids, drive belt tension, tube warm-up sequence, amplifier voltages within original spec. He closed the panel. He turned to Camille. "Miss Prescott, I have not played a record on this unit. Whatever your grandmother said in slot A 162 years ago is what's going to play when I turn this key. Mr. Briggs will explain why." Camille looked at Walter. Walter sat forward in his chair. "Miss Prescott, your grandmother walked into my father's recording studio on Chelsea Avenue in October of 1962. She recorded a song she had written herself, called By the River Slow. She paid in cash. My father pressed 3 acetates for her. He kept 1. She took 2. The one in this jukebox has been here since the day after the session. In February of 2018, she came back to me. She asked me to transfer her copy to a digital file. She said, and I will say it the way she said it, there is a person in my life I want to hear this someday, when she is ready. She did not name her. She did not have to. Camille had gone very still. She lowered herself slowly into the leather chair. Ashford cleared his throat. This is, of course, a moving piece of family history. But I would suggest, before we play any artifact of this kind, that it be properly catalogued and entered into the estate archive. There may be intellectual property considerations, and certainly questions of provenance. Teddy. Camille did not raise her voice. She did not turn her head. Be silent. Ashford closed his mouth. Marcus turned the key. The mechanism engaged with a quiet, mechanical certainty he had spent 4 weeks earning. The selection arm moved to A1. The 45 dropped onto the platter. The tone arm lifted, swung, settled. There was half a second of vinyl hiss, then a piano, soft and unhurried, the kind of accompaniment a session player provides when he understands the singer has more to say than the song does. Then the voice. Eleanor Prescott was 83 years old when she died, but on the recording she was 34, and her voice came out of the Wurlitzer the way the river comes out of a forest. Full, low, alto, lived in, a small rasp at the top of certain consonants that a singer can only develop by smoking exactly the right amount and stopping at exactly the right age. The song was 3 minutes and 41 seconds. It was about a woman watching a river move past her house in the south, thinking about everything she had given up to stay. The words were not sentimental. They were the kind of words a woman writes when she has lived long enough to know what staying actually costs. Naomi began to cry within 20 seconds. She did not move to wipe her face. Walter Briggs closed his eyes and smiled the small, private smile of a man hearing a sound he had not heard since his 11th year on Earth. Camille did not cry. She sat forward in the leather chair, with her hands folded in her lap, and listened to her grandmother the way a person listens to someone they are meeting for the first time and the second time in the same instant. Ashford looked at the walnut floor. The song ended. The mechanism reset. The tone arm lifted. The record returned to its slot. The selection arm moved back to its home position. The room held its breath. "Play it again, please." Camille's voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it had the weight of a request that did not expect to be refused. Marcus turned the key. The Wurlitzer obeyed. This time, halfway through the second verse, Camille closed her eyes. Marcus, standing near the cabinet, glanced over once and then away. There were moments that did not belong to him, and he had been raised to know the difference. When the second play ended, Camille stood up. She walked to the Wurlitzer and laid her hand on the curved wood of the cabinet for a long moment. Then she turned to him. "You said you found something behind the selection card holder." "Yes, ma'am. I left it where I found it. It seemed to be for you." He opened the front panel of the Wurlitzer. He reached behind the selection mechanism into a small recess in the cabinet that no service technician would ever inspect in normal restoration work. He had found it in the second week and put it back exactly as it had been. He withdrew it carefully and handed it to Camille. It was a standard letter-sized envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with tape that had crystallized at the edges. The front of the envelope read, in slow, careful handwriting Marcus now recognized, "For Camille, when the music comes back." Camille held it in both hands for a moment. She looked at Marcus, and at Walter, and at Naomi. She did not look at Ashford. She slid her thumbnail under the flap. The room was silent, except for the faint tick of the cooling amplifier. She read the letter once, all the way through. Her face did not change. She read it a second time, and the second reading took longer than the first. Then she unfolded a second document tucked inside, then a third, then a fourth. Then she set everything down on the small side table beside her chair, very carefully, the way one sets down something whose value cannot yet be fully calculated. She looked up at Ashford. Her voice was even. "Teddy, leave my house. Right now." Ashford did not move at first. His expression went through 3 or 4 small adjustments in the space of 2 seconds, as if he were running through possible scripts and discarding each one. "Camille, dear, you're upset. Let me see the letter. I'm sure there's an explanation. Your grandmother was very ill in her last years. You cannot rely on Teddy." He took a step toward her. Marcus shifted his weight, almost imperceptibly. He did not move forward. He did not need to. Walter, in the leather chair, set down his coffee cup with a small ceramic click that sounded, in the quiet room, like a gavel. Ashford looked at the 3 men in the room, at Marcus, who had not raised his hand or his voice in any of their interactions, and at Walter, who had outlived 2 wives in a war, and at Naomi, who was no longer crying and was, instead, looking at him with an expression Ashford had spent 9 years assuming she did not possess. He understood, with the speed of a man whose entire career had been built on reading rooms, that the balance had shifted and that no version of the next 20 seconds could shift it back. He picked up his briefcase. He buttoned his blazer. He walked out of the music room. They heard the front door of the house close, with the particular quietness of a man who knew that slamming it would have been a worse mistake than anything he had done that afternoon. Camille sat down in the leather chair. She did not speak for almost a full minute. Then she said, "I would appreciate it if all 3 of you would stay a little while longer. I'm going to need help understanding what I just read, and I would like the people in this room with me to be people who knew my grandmother and have no interest in this house except what's right." They stayed. Camille handed the letter to Naomi first. Naomi sat on the floor in front of the Wurlitzer to read it, her shoes off, her back against the cabinet. When she reached the bottom of the second page, she said one quiet word that Marcus had never heard her say in any of their previous conversations, and he understood from the texture of it that it was the first time she had said it aloud in 9 years of working for Eleanor Prescott's family. Marcus did not read the letter. It was not his to read, but over the next 40 minutes, with Naomi and Walter both in the room and the cooling Wurlitzer humming faintly in the background, Camille spoke aloud enough of it for them all to understand. Eleanor Prescott had begun to suspect, in the last 2 years of her life, that Bennett Ashford had been quietly mismanaging the family trust. She had identified 7 specific real estate properties she had purchased personally, with her own funds over the decades: 3 commercial buildings on Beale Street, a warehouse in South Memphis, 2 residential properties in Midtown, and 2 parcels of farmland in Tipton County. All of them had been deeded outside the family trust structure and were supposed to pass directly to Camille upon Eleanor's death. Eleanor had documented their original deeds, the personal payment records, and the proper title chain. She had also identified internal trust documents, drafted by Ashford between 2015 and 2017, that had absorbed all 7 properties into trust assets under his control. The total value, by Eleanor's own conservative estimate, was approximately $8.6 million. In the letter, Eleanor had written to her granddaughter, in language that was both loving and surgical, that she had hidden the envelope in the Wurlitzer because Teddy has eyes on every drawer and every safe in this house. He does not have eyes on this, and if you ever bring the music back, it means you are ready to hear what I could not say while I was alive. Camille called Diane Mercer, a real estate attorney who had handled a property matter for the label in 2022, and who was. Eleanor had written in a postscript the only attorney in Memphis Teddy is afraid of. By the next morning, Diane had retained a forensic accountant named Adrian Falk, who specialized in fiduciary fraud. While Camille was on the phone with Diane Mercer, Walter Briggs leaned over from his leather chair and spoke quietly to Marcus, low enough that the other two could not hear. "Mr. Reeve, sit. I have not told you something I think you should know." "Yes, sir." In 1962, when Eleanor came to my father's studio, she paid him the full session fee in cash. The full session fee, Mr. Reeve. In 1962, in Memphis, that was not what people paid black studio owners. White producers and white labels paid us about 40% of what they paid the white annexes for the same work. Everybody knew it. Nobody said it. The day Eleanor handed my father the cash, she said, "Henry, I am paying you what a recording session is worth. Music doesn't discriminate. Neither do I." My father did not forget that for the rest of his life. He told me about it when I was 11, and again when I was 30, and again the week before he died. Marcus did not speak. Walter watched him. "I came here today because she called me 62 years ago, and I owed her a hearing. But you, Mr. Reeve, you came here because somebody had to be the one to turn the key, and it was supposed to be you." Marcus nodded once, slowly. For the first time that afternoon, he felt something warm settle behind his sternum that he could not have named if asked. The civil complaint was filed in the Shelby County Chancery Court on the 1st of July, 2024. The allegations included breach of fiduciary duty, conversion, fraudulent conveyance, and self-dealing. Ashford was named personally. By early August, he had been formally indicted by a Shelby County grand jury on state charges of theft over $250,000. He was released on his own recognizance pending plea negotiations. On the 23rd of July, at 2:30 in the afternoon, Bennett Ashford walked into the shop on Lamar Avenue alone. Marcus was working on a 1956 Seaburg in Bay 1. Amari was at kindergarten. The bay doors were open because it was 101 degrees outside, and the swamp cooler could not keep up. Ashford was thinner than he had been in June. His summer suit was tan instead of navy. He set his briefcase on Marcus's workbench and opened it. Inside was a banded envelope, $50,000, Mr. Reeve. Cash. In exchange, I am asking only that your memory of the events of June 10th become a little less specific. You found an envelope. You did not see what was inside. You don't recall the conversation that followed my departure, the kind of memory issues that are perfectly reasonable for a man who was hired to fix a jukebox and not to take notes on a family matter that was not his business. Marcus looked at the briefcase. He did not touch it. Ashford lowered his voice. "I have seen many men in your position make the wise choice, Mr. Reeve. People in this neighborhood have ways of protecting themselves. You understand my meaning." The phrase "people in this neighborhood" hung in the air between them like a thin blade. Marcus understood it the way he had understood the security guard at the Belvedere gate, and the older customer at the coffee shop, and Ashford's first sentence in the music room on the 16th of May. He had spent his entire adult life understanding it. He wiped his hands on a shop rag. He set the rag on the bench. He met Ashford's eyes for the first time in any of their meetings. "Mr. Ashford, let me tell you something. My grandmother worked as a housekeeper in this neighborhood in 1958. The family she worked for never learned her last name. She told me once, when I was 12 years old, that decent people don't need to teach other people their place. They assume everybody already has one, and they spend their lives trying to make room for it. That's how I was raised. I'm not going to be the one who forgets the difference." He picked up the briefcase. He closed it. He set it on the floor by Ashford's feet. "Take this and leave my shop. Don't come back." Ashford stood very still for perhaps 3 seconds. Then he bent, picked up the briefcase, and walked out without another word. Marcus called Diane Mercer's office in less than 5 minutes. By 6 that evening, he had given a sworn statement to Detective Daniel Brennan of the Memphis Police Department's White-Collar Crimes Unit, with parallel notice provided to the TBI. The attempted bribery was added to the criminal case as an additional charge of attempted obstruction of justice. The plea agreement was finalized on the 16th of September. Ashford pleaded guilty to 1 count of theft over $250,000 and 1 count of attempted obstruction of justice. He was sentenced to 8 years in the Tennessee Department of Correction. He agreed to civil restitution of $6.8 million. He surrendered his license to practice law. Camille came to the shop on Friday, the 20th of September 2024, at 5:30 in the afternoon. Amari was at the corner table in the front, finishing the B-25 Mitchell, the wings finally dry. He was the only person in the shop besides Marcus, who was wiping down the bench at the end of the day. Loretta had a doctor's appointment, and Amari had ridden along after kindergarten. The bell over the door chimed. Marcus looked up. Camille was in jeans and a cream sweater. She was carrying a vinyl record under one arm and a small wooden box in her other hand. She set both on the workbench. The record was the first commercial pressing of By the River Slow, released that August on Prescott Sound's Heritage imprint. Eleanor Prescott was credited as the artist. The single had received airplay on public radio in 14 states. All proceeds had been directed to the Eleanor Prescott Foundation for Mississippi Delta Music Education, providing instruments and instruction to children in underserved counties along the lower river. "This is the first commercial pressing. I wanted you to have it. Thank you." The wooden box was hand-carved. The top was engraved in clean, careful letters. Amory Reeve. Camille opened it. Inside, on dark blue velvet, was a brand-new Hohner Special 20 harmonica in the key of C. She walked across the shop and knelt down beside Amari's table. She did not reach for him. She set the box on the table where he could see it. "Amari, your uncle helped me with something very important this year. I wanted to bring you a present to thank him, but I wanted it to be something for you." He looked at the harmonica. He looked at her. "Your uncle told me about your dad's harmonica. That one is special. This is a brand new one, so you can learn to play, and then one day, when you know how to play, you can play your dad's too." Amari was quiet. Then he said, very carefully, "Thank you, Miss Prescott," and he smiled. It was the first time he had smiled at someone outside Marcus and Loretta in almost 3 years. Camille stood. She came back to the bench. "Mr. Reeve, Prescott Sound is opening a heritage department, preservation and documentation of vintage equipment and recording artifacts. I need a technical consultant. 20 hours a week. You keep your shop. I would like you to think about it." "I'll think about it," she nodded. She picked up her keys. At the door, she paused and turned back. "Marcus." It was the first time she had used his given name. "Yes, ma'am. I want to apologize for the joke in May about the kiss." "You don't need to." "I do. I didn't know who you were yet." "You weren't supposed to. The work doesn't require it." From the corner table, a small voice spoke. "Are you staying for dinner?" Camille looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at Amari. She knelt again to the boy's height. "Not tonight, sweet boy. Maybe another time, if your uncle says it's all right." "Okay." She left. Marcus and Amari walked to the front of the shop and stood in the open doorway, watching her car pull west on Lamar toward the river. Neither of them had been looking. Neither of them had chosen any of this. The boy slid his hand into his uncle's. On the workbench behind them, the first pressing of Eleanor Prescott's voice rested in its sleeve, for the man who had made the music come back.